talking about Toulmin argument. And you may have heard a little bit about Toulmin before. You've probably encountered some of the terms and language that he used when forming his style of argument. Essentially what Toulmin argument is a way of constructing a sound logical argument, right? Using a specific pattern or a specific structure. Toulmin argument comes from a man named Stephen Toulmin, who was a philosopher in Britain in the 1950s, and he was really interested in a book called Uses of Argument, in thinking about everyday arguments and how when we are trying to make a point, how we can do so in a very logical way. Okay, so the first part of Toulmin logic is the claim, which you guys know already, right? So for Toulmin, a claim is a reasonable, debatable statement. You guys likely know this. You've encountered claims before, right? Okay, so let's think of a claim that we can work to support using Toulmin logic. So maybe pot should be legalized, Bernie Sanders should be the next president, maybe iPhones are the best cell phones, or people should buy iPhones exclusively, right? Any of these are debatable, reasonable claims. So I'll kind of just pick one for us to use. How about people should use iPhones? So now we have our claim. But Toulmin didn't just say, oh, we can make any claim, right? He did something really, I think, special and smart. He said we needed to place qualifiers on our claims. And qualifiers are limitations. Okay, things that help you make it more reasonable. So when you're making claims, you can ask yourself, well, when is this true? For whom is this true? Where is this true? Or under what circumstances is this true? Right? This makes you sound like a reasonable person. If you're saying pot should be legalized, that is huge. We're saying like all over. So you could ask yourself the question, well, when should it be legalized? Or for whom should it be legalized? Or where should it be legalized? So you might say, well, in California, for medicinal purposes, pot should be legalized. Notice you've totally narrowed in your claim, you've limited it, and you sound more reasonable. So going back to our claim that we're working with, let's think of maybe a qualifying statement, something we could add to this to make it a little bit more narrow. So people should use iPhones. Well, when? What if they can't afford one? Should they be using an iPhone? Maybe not. So let's think about, well, who? Maybe people who like to connect quickly, maybe people who are Apple users already, maybe Apple users who want to be able to share information quickly with a broader network. So anything like that helps you narrow it. So let's say people who like to share information, maybe large amounts, right? That's a special thing with iPhone. You can share heaps of information, heaps of data. So like to share large amounts of information should use iPhones, right? Notice now we sound a little bit more reasonable rather than saying everyone, all people should. And we're saying, well, just this select group should. So that's qualifiers. But it doesn't end there, right? Claims always need support. And in Toulmin logic, we call this the data, or sometimes the reasoning, sometimes the grounds, sometimes the evidence. There's a lot of names for this. But for our class, we're just going to call it the data/reason, okay? Your support. So data. Support for your claim, right? Your reasons for your claim. Going back to our pot example, so pot should be legalized in California for medicinal purposes. We can say, well, why? What proof do we have? What supports that? Going over here, people should use iPhones. We can ask the question, well, why? What proof, what evidence can we use to support that? Right? And often this is in the form of anecdotes. This could be hard facts. This could be quotations from experts, right? So we can think, okay, what's the best support, the best reason we could bring in to support this claim that people should be using iPhones? Well, I might say, from personal experience, I know that you can share huge files with other people. So I think that's a pretty good reason. So I might say, based on personal experience, I know that you can share huge files with other people. I'm just going to put ... because I'm running out of room. Right? And it might even give a specific megabyte, right, to give some hard evidence about these huge files that I can share, not only from my iPhone, but also based on my MacBook, right? So now that's my evidence to say, yeah, people should be using iPhones. But we're not done yet. And this is the hardest part, I think, of Toulmin logic, the warrant. What warrants your claim and data? The underlying principle. Let's do a real simple one. Let's imagine you're saying you should eat pizza, or pizza is delicious. That's your claim, right? And you're like, okay, how can I prove this? And you say, yeah, pizza is delicious because it is cheesy. That is your reason. That's your data. What are you actually saying? What principle is actually underlying that logic? Well, essentially, you're saying cheesy foods are delicious, right? Pizza is delicious. Why? Well, because it's cheesy. Well, essentially, you're saying all cheesy foods are delicious. If someone asks you, hey, how was that movie? And you say, it was great. It was full of action. Right? Your underlying principle is movies that are full of action are good movies, right? So going back to our example here, what is the underlying assumption for our data and our claim, right? Let's think about this for a second. What are we actually saying here? Well, we're actually saying good cell phones, the best cell phones, are those that can connect with people, those that can allow you to share large amounts of information, right? That is our actual warrant. So, good cell phones are ones that allow people to share large amounts of information. Pretty logical, right? But often when we're talking about warrants, this is where we can really find the holes in someone's logic. Let's go back to the pizza example. If I said, yeah, pizza's delicious, someone asked me why, oh, it's so greasy. I'm essentially saying greasy foods are delicious. I don't know if I'm buying that, right? It's like all greasy grease is delicious, right? Sometimes by thinking about the underlying assumption or underlying principle can help us see, oh yeah, my logic makes sense here. So the warrant often isn't really stated. Sometimes it is. But sometimes it's just assumed, right? But thinking about when you're constructing your own arguments, thinking about your warrants will help you build stronger arguments. Oh, but we're not done, right? Toulmin also talked about backing, which is essentially support for your warrant. So the action movie one, right, if you're saying, oh yeah, this movie's great, has a lot of action in it. Well, a lot of people are like, I don't like action, right? So now you need to support the fact that action movies are good. You need to back that up. Okay, so backing is essentially support for your warrant. Right? Support for your underlying reasoning. So coming back to our example here, we can think about, well, what supports this statement that good cell phones are ones that allow people to share large amounts of information. This could be a statistic, this could be another fact, this could be another anecdote, right? So think about, I mean, for our class, I might use an example from our class where imagine a group of students who are working on a group project and now can instantly connect with one another and share large files with one another without having to get out their laptops, without having to go and find a computer, right? So now I'm going to use that story to back this up. So imagine a group of students who can now instantaneously share huge files with one another. That is backing. So we've come this far. There's really one more step to Toulmin logic, which is counter-argument and rebuttal. Toulmin's a smart man. He said so often, people challenge our claims, right? And we have to rebut them, meaning we have to present a counter to a counter argument. So, and often if we're thinking about the actual writing process, and if we use this information to create a paragraph, sometimes counter arguments just get slipped into our paragraphs, like even though some people may say blah, 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 sometimes they're whole paragraphs. So we look at this and it's like, okay, what challenges can we anticipate? You guys know. If you're saying iPhones, you know Android, and some of you guys are Android users, they're going to complain, right? Well, what about Android? What about Samsung, maybe specifically? Samsungs are just as good, right? Samsungs have so much. So, counter-argument, what about Samsung? Well, how can we rebut that? Right? Maybe we say, sure. Even though Samsungs do have special features, ultimately, to go back to our point, it is only iPhones that allow you to share the biggest files of cell phones, the only cell phone that allows you to share huge files instantaneously without uploading them first to a cloud, right? That is how I would rebut that. The only company that allows you to do this. Notice that would be pretty easy to weave into our argument, just to say, yeah, even though Samsung users might say this, it's ultimately only iPhones that allow users to share huge files instantaneously. I know this can be a lot of work to do, but notice if you go through this process, you're going to be able to construct very sound arguments. So this is kind of part one of Toulmin argument. This is how we can apply Toulmin logic or Toulmin rhetoric to persuasive writing. But we need to have a part two discussion, right? How do we apply this to the rhetorical analysis?